Good. Thank you all so much for waiting. Really appreciate you all bearing with me. But I know you all have your career part coming up, so I wanted to give you a quick introduction of who I am, and then also kind of help you all out with your resumes. I know you're all prepping your resumes as career fair season kind of comes along the corner, and so I'll be here next Friday as well. So hopefully I'll see some familiar faces there. But yeah, my name's Alec. I am a campus recruiter with CoStar Group. So for some context on who CoStar is. So we're essentially a market data and analytics company. And just to make sure, can everyone hear me in the back? Okay, awesome. Just wanted to make sure I was talking about data. But yeah, so we do identify mainly as a technology company, but everything that we do is kind of centered around real estate. We don't actually transact in real estate, but think all the data and technology behind that. So originally we started out selling data packages through the site called CoStar Suites, and eventually we evolved into CoStar Group. And from there, CoStar Group, we acquired close to 30 different brands. Here's just a few to name some. So CoStar Suites obviously is the one that we started out with. One that students tend to be most familiar with is apartments.com. We also have LoopNet if you're familiar with the commercial real estate space. And then some others like lands.com, BizBuySell, STR for hotels, pretty much a brand on every area of real estate that you can think of. And then we also have some more on the West Coast, like 10X for auctions. And there's it's pretty much all inclusive. We are a leader in pretty much every space except for, I would say, homes.com is probably the only one that we are not yet a leader in. That's because that one is our newest one, but we've risen pretty quickly. I think we're the number 3 most used home search platform right now. And so that within a year, I think it's impressive in itself. But I won't bore you guys too much with info about CoStar Group. Here's just a quick look at our values. Our mission statement is to digitize the world of real estate. But these are just some of the things that we hold true to us. I would say when you're looking at any company, I think it's always important to research their values every time you go to an interview. So this is why I include this. And then I also do know a lot of you are probably here because you are interested in opportunities with different companies. So we actually do have opportunities open. If you scan this and you're interested in any of the ones on with CoStar that you see on the screen, I'll send out an email to everyone that does fill out this form. It should only take about a minute or two. But yeah, we have internships coming up and associate software engineer positions coming up. Those are both going to be for the Irvine and San Diego offices. Those applications do close mid-October, October 20th. So get your applications in before then. But if you're graduating, I would say prior to July of 2024, you're eligible for that associate software position as long as you have at least 3 months of an internship. And then pretty much everything after that, the dates you see below up until 2026, you're eligible for the internship. And if you graduate later than that, congratulations, you guys are super early. But yeah, so I won't go over the agenda too much, but I'm just going to be taking you guys through what I think makes a good resume. So this is a little bit of a controversial take that I might have, but pretty much everything that you all hear and see for advice on the resume is suggestion. I might get a lot of hate for that comment, but there is no right or wrong way to do it. There's ways that I think are highly preferred. And so I think that's what I'm really going to be focusing on. And I'll address some of those along the way as we go. Just to have to take that off so you guys can't see it all at once. Anyone who didn't look, what would you guys say the purpose of a resume is?
To give an overview of your education, your work experience, and some of the personal projects that you have throughout your academic journey.
Okay, awesome. Does anyone else have any other ideas on what a resume can be used for?
Just like to let recruiters and interviewers know like what type of person you are, what type of background you have, to see if they can fit in like your company culture or what they're doing.
Okay. And then it's all the marketing.
And to showcase your skills and experiences.
Perfect. So those are all great answers. You guys pretty much hit the nail on the coffin. It's to outline your professional and academic experiences. So it basically provides the recruiter and hiring managers with a summary of who you are. So I would say the main thing that resume, when I say everything is a guideline, I think it's important to understand who is reading your resume. If you're applying to a company that gets a lot of attention, some of the bigger names out there, or any Fortune 500 company, CoStar Group or another company that gets hundreds to thousands of applicants, I think it's important for your resume to be easy to read. If you have your resume in size 4 font, I'm probably not going to be able to read it. I'm going to sit there straight in my eyes, and I might give up at a certain point when I'm on my 200 resumes. But so it's really important that it's easy to read. Use a font that's large enough. Make sure your margins don't cut it off. We can go dive a little bit more into that as we go. And then also to impress, I would say this is, aside from an interview, this is one of the only places where it's socially acceptable to brag about yourself. Not that I know from experience, but yeah, that's besides the point. So we're going to go over what belongs on a resume. Does anyone have any ideas of what might belong on a resume? And I thank you guys so much, everybody volunteered so far. Yes, go ahead and agree.
Positions that you're on you're applying for.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said positions with experience relevant to the position you're applying for.
Okay, awesome. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
Where you studied.
Where we studied. Okay,
School you went to.
perfect. And then one more over here I can take.
Like any projects or like things to work on.
Okay, awesome. Here's some things that are pretty self-explanatory, some maybe not as much, but I'm going to go over some of these real quick and a couple more beyond this as well that you might not see up here. So obviously your name, they need to know what to call you. If you use a nickname, you put that in parentheses or put your real name in parentheses. Your contact information. I've had resumes that did not have an email or a phone number, and I had no idea how to contact this person. I am not going to go looking you up on Google and hunting your information down. There are times where there's just way too many people for that. So make sure you always include your contact information on here. I know I say address too. I think full address is a little bit outdated. You can always put your city and the state that you live in. It doesn't necessarily have to be your full address, that you don't have to tell them exactly where you live and they don't really need to know that. Aside from that, your education. So this includes your major, your minor, and your anticipated graduation date. I'll even add to this. I'll say GPA, and I'll list that as optional. So GPA is a little bit of a trickier one. So if your GPA is too low, you might not want to include that. If you have a 2.3, that might be better to leave off. I would say even if you have a higher GPA, I opted to leave mine off personally. The reason for that is if I have a 3.75, I was afraid of being compared to anyone that had a 4.0. 3.75 is a great GPA, by the way, if you guys do have that. But if someone does have a 4.0, I was afraid of being compared to that. And so that's really up to personal preference. I would say the only time I would list it as mandatory if the company requires a minimum GPA. So if they say you need to have a minimum of 3.0, make sure to include your GPA, especially if it's above a 3.0. So definitely something to include. And then when I also said anticipated graduation day, I think this is a really big one, especially when you're applying to internships. They want to make sure that you're still enrolled in schools. Beyond that, I would say technical skills are a big one, especially if it's listed in required skills. Not every company does this, but a lot of them do. Companies are audited on the resumes that they look at, and they are often asked, why did you reject this person if they suspect any discrimination. So I do everything by the book personally. If you don't meet minimum qualifications, then I'm obviously not able to pass them through. But make sure you look at the required qualifications and also desired qualifications, but required especially. That will determine, if you're even able to make it forward for a lot of companies. So if they list a few languages that you need to know, and you know them, and you don't put them on there, then they're not going to know that you know those skills. So I would say kind of try to centralize it, even if those weird applications that do make you list your skills on top of that. If the recruiter only looks one place for whatever reason, make sure to have it everywhere. Beyond that, internship or work experience. I think this is one of the most important ones. If I haven't seen this yet, but if you submitted a resume without any work experience or even project experience, I don't know what else you would put on there, but it might be a little harder for the recruiter to justify pushing you forward. And you won't have a lot to talk about. Obviously, there are situations where I know some of you might not have started working yet, especially if you're early on in your college career. And that's completely fine. And there are things that you can do to kind of get a head start on. You have projects that the school, posts the different things that you can do, like competitions and whatnot. So it's not just limited to projects. I know that the school has different coding competitions available to them. So those are some big ones as well. Any courses that you did are also great that you put on your resume, especially if you show that you learned a decent amount from that course and that you're able to understand and apply what you learned in that course. So those are just some things that you don't necessarily have. That volunteer experience is also a great thing to include if you don't have any work experience. No one's going to say, no, you can't volunteer unless they're completely full, but most of the time people will take that for your word. Student involvement, and that kind of relates back to what I was saying. Obviously, you guys are all here, so you can put that you were a part of the Computer Science Society, in the Computer Science Society, whether you're a board member or not. I think that gives a great edge to all of you. It shows that you're involved in your community, you're staying up to date with the latest trends. You're being basically that you're being a great contributing member of your community. So I think those are really big things. Leadership positions, for example, if you applied as a board member for this club or a different club, whether it's tech related or not, it does show leadership experience. It doesn't have to be tech related, I guess, community to be considered a piece of leadership experience. So those can be really big ones as well. Academic projects, like you mentioned earlier, any type of research that you've done for computer science related to the field, and then personal interests or accomplishments. Personal interest, I would say, is really an optional one. If you really need to fill up your resume, it can help the interviewer to know a little bit more about you and have things to talk about in the during your interview. And then accomplishments is also a big one. If you got any awards or anything like that. Okay, what does not belong on a resume? What do you think are some things that I probably do not need to see on your resume?
Okay.
What's that?
Hobbies.
Hobbies. Okay, gotcha. Anyone else?
High school.
High school. Okay, that's an interesting one. Anyone else? No? Okay. We'll jump right into it. Yeah, so these are some things that I don't think belong on the resume. One of them is references. I think that's a little bit of outdated advice. I think it's kind of expected. You don't even have to put things like references available on request. They will reach out to you regardless of whether you have that on your resume or not. So I think honestly it's a waste of space, and it's something that you can use for other things on your resume. You all eventually, I'm very confident, are going to have more than enough to put on the resume. Don't, especially if you have multiple pages already, don't fill it up. The resume should ideally be one page for every 10 years of experience that you all have. So all of your resumes in here should ideally be one page. If you submit a full page document on your resume, I'm probably not going to read the whole thing. I'll read a portion of it. So you want to make sure I'm really reading what's important. You don't want me to miss anything that might really be really important because I didn't go through the full 12 pages. So when I would say, really highlight on that one page what is important to the job. And sometimes you'll customize it a little bit from job to job, especially if it's a position that you really, really want. Beyond that, payment type. Don't tell them how you will be paid or anything like that. Don't put your banking info on that. I'm not going to do anything with that, but I can't promise that you're not going to be calling your bank saying there's no money in your bank. But that's enough to pay. That hasn't happened to me, but I think that has happened to someone else that I know. So I won't talk too much on that though. A picture of headshot. This one is a little controversial and goes back to what I said earlier about everything on your resume. Every resume guideline is more of a recommendation. I don't like to put a picture or headshot. I think in the world today, there's a lot of unconscious bias. People are being very cognizant of biases, but there are still unconscious biases that, world, I think today is still learning about. And I think it's great that we have education on things like this now, but there are still biases. And so I don't personally put that on. I don't think it's necessary. I know if you were maybe looking for a more creative field, that might be something that might be more acceptable. Like if you're into acting or whatnot. But for computer science, I think it's one of those things that isn't super necessary. And a lot of times, I think it doesn't add a ton of value. The person that's interviewing you probably doesn't care what you look like, or at least I hope they don't. But yeah. Painting like various fonts and colors. Again, this is a controversial one. This depends on the person. I actually took some of these slides from here because I like theirs better than going on the workshop. So this one I left in because it's an interesting take. I know some people don't like it, especially if it's hard to read. If you put a bright pink colored font on there, that's hard for me to read when I'm staring at a tiny screen. That's going to be difficult for me to read. So if you do put on multiple colors, it will kind of make things stand out and highlighted more, so that that is your goal for like a header or whatnot, and it makes it easier to read. I think by all means go for it. Just make sure that it is an easy color to kind of read, and don't use some type of calligraphy font or anything. That make sure you pick a font that's easy to read. If you use any type of calligraphy font, there's a chance I might not be able to read it. But yeah, a soft skills section. Again, this is a more controversial one. This might be something that you have when you're earlier on in your career. But as you progress and get more experience and confident by the time that you all graduate, you're going to get to a point where you're like, I don't need this anymore. There's not enough space for this. So this one, I would say earlier on, definitely if you need put things on, definitely go for it. But I would say later on, I think it's more than acceptable to take it off if you want to focus on your hard skills, what languages what technologies what experiences, what your contributions to different projects and competitions were. But things of that nature, I think will really show a lot about you. And then any soft skills that you do want to highlight, so you can always add to your cover letter. So here's an example of a heading that we have. So this is a student from Virginia. So they kind of have the name on top. That should be how every resume starts. If you put anything else there, I might be confused and think that's your name. But that's typically where everyone keeps their name. You can see they go across for their information. I do that as well. It kind of saves a little bit of space rather than putting everything downward more. And so I think that's a great way to save space. This is just an example format. Obviously, your format might vary a little bit, but it is a clear format, and I think it is something you could probably steal. But yeah, they have their education there, as you can see, their major, their minor, expected graduation date. You could even condense this to be less lines. Just make sure if you do condense this to be less lines, that you still keep that readability factor. That's important. So if you need more space in your resume, definitely something that you can do, but make sure that you kind of keep that consistent so that it's easy to read. Here we go. So another thing that we're going to talk about is technical skills. So I would say early on, you're always going to have your education pretty close to the top. You get a ton of experience, or after you graduate college, that's something you typically move down to further down because your experience becomes more important than your actual education. And you'll have learned a lot more from your experiences and your education at a certain point. So going off of that, technical skills is something that might be higher up. This one's a little, I would say, broad, and it can fit into different sections of your resume, but generally you want to highlight the most important things first. So technical skill could be one of them. So things like programming languages, operating systems, databases, software, especially if this is something that is required in the job description, you definitely want to include this here. So I think that's a really big one. Experiences. This is a really big one as well. This will probably be at the top of a lot of your resumes eventually. So you want to include obviously where you have where you worked, the position title. Make sure there's a distinction between those two. I know sometimes companies give out weird titles. Sometimes that can be adjusted to a more appropriate title, as long as you're not inflating your title. Don't say I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Google if that wasn't your title. That's just an example. But if, for example, you're an intern with a weird title, and maybe it's called a machine learning internship, and for whatever reason you're doing more development opportunities, you can kind of modify that so it shows that you work in the development opportunities. So it's not skipped over. So that's an example. You always want to include the dates that you're there as well to make sure that the person there knows how long you've been working there as well. Actually, I'll touch on this really quickly before I do that. Another thing to include is project involvement content. So this isn't just limited to projects like I mentioned earlier. This can be things like competitions. So you always want to include the title of the project, a short description of it, the date that you work on the project, and also some campus involvement as well. So like I mentioned earlier, campus involvement can be anything from involvement in Computer Science Society. If you're a part of another organization on campus, Society of Hispanic Engineers, for example, that could be another one that you might want to put on your resume if you are. So again, this also will follow into leadership experience as well. Okay, I'm going to touch on this chart. I hope you can all read this in the back, but I'll kind of read as much as I can out loud. But this is called Bloom's taxonomy for digital planning verbs. Have you all heard of power of verbs? Is there anyone, by a show of hands, how many of you have heard of power verbs? Okay, we have a few. So power verbs are things that I like to use on resumes, and there's a lot of times on resumes where people will, I will say, tell more of a story. This makes it sound a little bit more professional by adding in power verbs. So instead of saying, oh, I use X, Y, Z, you can come up here and look, and there's tons of different verbs that you can choose from that kind of help you convey what you're trying to say in a professional manner. So instead of saying I use this, you can say things utilizing XYZ tool, I was able to accomplish. And so utilize, accomplish can be some examples of power verb. And there's different categories here that you can kind of play around on. You can actually probably Google this and it will show up. I know there's other types of parts out there as well that you can kind of pull from and use, and that will also give you a pretty good idea of what to use. I know a lot of schools also have resources in their career center. I'm pretty sure Cal Poly Komodo will as well. That will kind of help you get an idea of what power verbs to use. If you're using verbs that might show that, a third grader wrote the resume, then it might be time to upgrade that. So you can do anything like collaborating. Just make sure your verbs are different. Don't say manage, coordinating. Spice it up a little bit, give a little bit of variety. That'll really go a long way in helping and will really show kind of your basic intellect on your resume. So we're going to do a short activity. I don't know how many of you have brought your resume, but just take a couple minutes. This is 3 minutes, but just for sake of time, we'll say 2 minutes. Take a couple minutes and talk about some verbs that you currently have on your resume if you have it on you, and if you don't, talk about some things that you think you could change on your resume. Using power verbs up here. So things like what we mentioned earlier. So this is I use. You can say utilizing. So you can talk just to the person next to you about this really quickly, and then we'll resume over about 2 minutes.
Integrating what the database, integrating files. So it's
Oh yeah. Another word for classifying things is love.
There you
If you recommend with the work experience before education.
It depends on how much work experience you have. I would say, really on, especially, your internship, so I feel like more important to your internship. If you're about to graduate, it might be okay, but yeah, you're especially if it's related to what you want to do software development, for example, and you have a lot of experience like that, and you know with that higher up. Yeah. I don't know.
No, bro, just.
All right. I'm gonna start following up people now. Let anyone wants to volunteer. Does anyone want to share some verbs that they were able to improve on their resume? You don't have to give me a whole list, just you can give an example. It can be one that we've used, it can be a different one. Has anyone found anything on the resume that they were able to kind of utilize and change on the resume? Don't be shy, I won't bite. Ow. I'll bite. I'll bite in the building. No one wants to volunteer?
Only volunteer.
I'll volunteer.
Okay.
I'll volunteer.
Your reaction box?
Yeah. Do you want me to like mention the verb that I'm using?
Yeah, it can just be one that you just changed, or it can be one that you've changed in the past. Any one that you've changed and what you changed it to, basically.
I changed it from like create or like make.
Okay.
Or like change.
Okay.
I changed it to migrate.
Okay.
I think that's the term you're supposed to use when you're like migrating a code base from one language to another.
Yeah,
So
I
I
think
use the word migrated.
migrating is definitely a much stronger verb than changing, and especially if it's appropriate to what you're doing. Always use the correct terminology on your resume. Awesome, thank you so much for volunteering. So I have a couple of these examples, but just for the sake of time, we're just gonna go over one. I'm gonna give you guys a second to look over this resume, and I'll let you guys kind of take what you've learned in this short amount of time of being today and tell me what you guys think can be improved on this. Maybe you guys will catch something that I didn't catch too. Yeah, go ahead.
They could have their name in the top.
Yes, that is a big one. Anyone else? I know there's at least a couple more. Oh, yes, go ahead.
There's some soft skills like work ethic and good learning.
Yeah, quick learner. Yeah, those are probably better left with other skills that you do know, especially if it makes it crowded. This one isn't too crowded, but that's a good one. Yes.
Would you say moving career objectives to like a cover letter would be like a better idea than putting on resume?
That's one of those ones that I think is based on preference. It's definitely something that you can do. Career objectives, I would say, if you do have it there, you want to keep it short and concise. But if you're going to type out a whole paragraph, it is something that I agree. It's better on a cover letter. So you want career objective, it could be just what you want to end up doing in the long run, especially if you have a lot of experience. So if you have maybe development experience, but you want to break into, I don't know, machine learning, for example, that could be something good to include in the objective. Awesome. Yes.
Better verbs, like using like use Swift or something. I can't see, but.
Yes.
it's like utilizing-
Yes, awesome. That's a good one too. And even help is another one, to your point as well.
I think the work, the verb work is not suitable in that context roles. I think we replace that with like collaborate.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good one as well. All right, any last minute ones? Okay, gotcha. There's a couple more examples, but just for the sake of time, I do want to give you guys some time to ask questions as well and just go over this last slide. So just some best practices to keep in mind going forward. Always update your resume regularly. Don't submit an outdated resume. When you're earlier on in your career, especially in college, it's going to evolve a lot because you're going to be gaining a lot of experience very quickly. So every semester might be what you want, how often you want to update it. You know, take some time beginning or at the end of the semester to update it. I would say beyond that, once you get a little bit further, it'll be less frequent. It might become every year. And then eventually, if you're not changing jobs for a while, once you find a place that you like, it'll probably be even less often. But early in your career, it'll be pretty often. Aside from that, get your resume reviewed often by multiple sources. You know, there's plenty of resources on campus. They have different types of resume events that you can go to and other workshops. Keep a running list of the skills and experiences in order on a tailored resume for the job search. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then I would say never use the resume template. When you submit a resume, I would say always submit it as a PDF. I'll take it a step further. When you submit it as a Word document, sometimes it'll do weird things and it'll show up weird. And so you might have things that are supposed to be on the same line, yeah, completely different lines. So a PDF will ever change. I think those are some great points. And I'll just leave you guys with this last piece before I end it. Here are the 4 R's that I do like to use. So resume and other application materials for your job search. You know, always research the company beforehand, that culture and their job opportunities. Resilience takes time and patience. You're not going to be the best fit for every single job. I'm not going to be the best fit for some other recruiting job. Some other recruiters are not going to be the best fit for my job. And that's okay. You know, so you have to be persistent and you are going to find a job that does best fit you. And it doesn't always have to be what you think is your dream company. I didn't even know what CoStar was when I went to college. And so, but so far I've loved it. Resources, and take advantage of all the resources around you. I know you guys, every university student pays quite a bit of tuition. So always be sure to use those resources that are given to you, because most of them I know on campus are free. So that's a great thing. So take advantage of those and keep using them. But yeah, really appreciate you guys for taking time to listen. I'd love to answer any questions if we do have time.
Pretty sudden. I don't think anybody's here. I think so.
Oh, awesome. Does anyone have any questions?
So for the resume, you said we cannot use the template, so we have to write everything from scratch.
I would say,
Because I don't know the specific font, like what the name is, something like font name, font size.
yeah, as long as it's easy to read, I think it's okay. Usually for resume, you can use anywhere between a 10 and 14 size font. And then I like to write mine from scratch. And I know there's people in the career center that can't help you. If you need to, just because they have something to apply with, you can use it. I don't, because it makes it difficult later on to change things. It messes up the formatting of the template, and a lot of times you have to restart. And so sometimes it's better to take that time initially to create it from scratch, because it makes it much easier to change later on without destroying the formatting of that template. But that's personal preference. I think, yeah.
So if you don't have like a lot of experience once you're like really starting your like education in the field, how would you say you can like make yourself look more interesting on your resume since you haven't really done much yet? Or do you think you should just wait to like start looking like internships and stuff like that?
I don't think you need to wait to start doing internships. I think things that you can include are what I mentioned earlier, you know, projects that you've done in classes, courses that you've taken so far. Besides that, you know, clubs that you're a part of, like Computer Science Society, or things that you can put on. You can enter a competition on campus. I know there's going to be at least one this fall. And then I know there's also some in the spring as well. So you can do things of that nature. Or even just projects on your own. One of the interns we hired last year, he didn't have any intern experience, but he was able to get he was talking about the games that he made on his free time. He used a lot of languages that we use as a company as well. Yes.
Like, we have to use one page resume, or is it okay to have multiple pages?
I would say if you have less than 10 years, just keep it to one page. You want to make sure you're highlighting the points that are really important. Because realistically, I think most students are at a point in their career where a lot of what they put on the resume is fluff. So narrow it down, think what's important to this job. And sometimes all of your experience will not fit on your resume. And it's okay to have another document that's a master document and kind of cut that down to each job. I have a master resume and then a generic one. And if I really, really want a job, sometimes I'll custom. So that's kind of what I do, and I will customize it based on that master. So I have at least 2 running resumes and all. So one's just more of a I pull experience as needed.
So when I'm writing my resume, I figure out how to like write certain things. Just like about like for example, if you have a certain experience, like how should you be writing it like in terms of like words, like sentence structure wise? Like should I be writing it in first person or third person? Or should I be starting with a verb, like maintaining like a server or something?
I typically start with the verb. So that's usually how I would start. I would say what's important is get it on paper first. And then a lot of times you can rework it from there. And I would say even once you get it on paper, that's a great time where you say, oh, I can take this person, or anything. They will a lot of times make an appointment with you and they'll help you kind of schedule that time to work through your bullets. But great question. Yes.
Is it internship that have to do with computer science still with putting on experience?
I think, for the meantime, it can definitely be once you do get that technical experience, especially if you're applying technical roles, obviously that's going to be replaced later on. But if you need to fill up the space, I think it's definitely okay to put on. Awesome. Thank you guys. I think we're wrapping up. But feel free to take the flag if you know where we're going.
Oh.